Pecha is on Dr. Tompkins Square Park, Gentrification and the Revanchist City by Neil Smith. To understand Smith's article, it is essential to fully comprehend what he means by gentrification. Gentrification is defined as the process of renewal and rebuilding, accompanying the influx of middle-class or affluent people into deteriorating areas that often displaces poor residents. Neil Smith explains this phenomenon from a production-side argument. He explains it through economics and the relationships between flows of capital and the production of urban space. From the start of the article, it is clear that Neil Smith is against gentrification. He begins by quoting a New York realtor on de-gentrification, or reversal of the gentrification process. The realtor states, in the 1970s, the theory was that a few gentrified areas would have a contagious effect and pull up neighboring districts, but that didn't happen. Smith continues to explain that the era of gentrification has come and gone. He states, gone is the white upper middle class optimism of gentrification, which was supposed to reclaim the new urban frontier in the name of largely white pioneers. In its place, an unabated litany of crime and violence, drugs and unemployment, immigration and depravity, all laced through with terror. This idea of degentrification brings about another term in revanchism. Revanchism is defined as a component of the new anti-urbanism, a reaction against the theft of the city by variously defined others, and in large part a defense of a traditionally white, middle-class worldview. Smith is getting to the idea that the people who normally have the upper hand, the white middle class, all of a sudden do not have control of the city through degentrification and thus want it back. The fight for control of a lost territory, the city, sparks the idea of the revanchist city. Smith states that the revanchist city has become a powerful reality. More than anything, it expresses a race, class, and gender terror felt by middle and ruling class whites who are suddenly stuck in a place by a ravaged property market, the threatened reality of unemployment, the decimation of even minimal social services, and the emergence of minority and immigrant groups, as well as women and powerful urban actors. Smith highlights two events that incorporated race, nationalism, class, and gender that confirmed revanchism in the post-gentrification society. The first incident happened in Los Angeles following the 1992 acquittal of 4 police officers in the beating of Rodney King. While the media tried to explain the riot as a simple black assault on whites, there was a flood of racial stereotypes, creating an extremely hybrid uprising, possibly the first multi-ethnic rioting in modern American uprising. The second event was the bombing of New York City's World Trade Center less than a year later. This destroyed the symbol of 1970s downtown renewal and the 1980s global urbanism. The failure of the building's security system led to its depiction as a sick building in a sick city. This bombing was a link between American urban life and attention to brutal violence internationally by the media hunt for foreign Arab terrorists. Smith moves on to focus on the main point of his article, Tompkins Square Park. The park is 10.5 acres and sits in New York City's Lower East Side. The first time Tompkins Square Park became a national symbol of the struggle against gentrification and the homeless was on August 6, 1988. A force of 400 police officers, attempting to reinforce the 19th century curfew in the park, started a police riot against homeless residents, protesters, punks, and other park users. This only sparked further resistance by the people and attracted homeless people, squatters, housing and anti-gentrification activists, and local anarchists. There were as many as 100 structures in the park at one time. About 300 people slept there on its busiest nights. Squatters took over 50 buildings in the neighborhood, housing nearly 1,000 people, and the city's homeless population soared between 70,000 and 100,000 people. However, just after 5 a.m. on June 3, 1991, 350 police officers in full riot gear moved into Tompkins Square. They woke more than nearly 200 sleeping residents and evicted them. The remains of private belongings were bulldozed. The park was surrounded by an 8-foot fence, and officers were left to patrol the park. Access was only allowed to the playground and the dog run. While most people focus on the now clean and gentrified Tompkins Square Park, Smith highlights the problem with forcing homeless people from one place, which ultimately puts them into another public space. This is specifically evident under the Manhattan Bridge. Evictees set up encampments to hide from the public view, police attack, and bad weather. The shantytown of 50 to 70 homeless under the bridge, known as the Hill, was described as one of the most visible symbols of homelessness in Manhattan. In turn, the area was bulldozed in August 1993. A second example was Grand Central Station, where a much different approach was attempted. The Grand Central Partnership was formed to privatize public functions. The partnership instigated private security patrols and offered food and shelter to homeless people in a nearby church. The overall object was to clean up the station, even if the eviction of the homeless was done with a much lighter hand. It is interesting to note Smith's comparison to the Lower East Side developer and Frederick Engels. The developer stated that as gentrification swept east through the neighborhood, the homeless would all be forced out. They would push east to the river and given life preservers. This is strikingly similar to Engels' remark a century and a half ago. He stated, the bourgeoisie has only one method to settling the housing question. The breeding places of disease, the infamous holes and cellars in which a capitalist mode of production confines our workers night after night, are not abolished, they are merely shifted elsewhere. Smith argues that since the gentrification of the city, most notably the widespread homelessness, public spaces has started to look like slums, which force white middle class into acting into a revanchist manner by taking back their public space through gentrification. The idea of a revanchist city became a national phenomenon, marking New York City as a global city. Tompkins Square Park was reopened in 1992 and was met with high praise from the media. The New York Times heralded the reconstructed park as a shining emerald. The aestheticization of the neighborhood was in full swing, photographs in the press of young, white, middle-class families enjoying the park once again. With all the positive aspects of gentrification, even Smith agrees that the argument for degentrification seems at best premature. However, he casts light on why gentrification may have quite negative results. He notes, the continuance of gentrification will not mean the end of revanchist city and the return of a kinder, gentler urbanism. The more likely scenario is of a sharpened bipolarity of the city with the middle class assumptions about civil society retrenches a narrow set of social norms against which a recidivism of the city is found dangerously wanting. And we can expect a deepening villainization of working class, minority, homeless, and many immigrant residents of the city through interlocking strips of violence, drugs, and crime. Those are my questions. Is there a possible solution to city problems that lies between white, upper, and middle class gentrification and a space filled with crime, violence, drugs, and unemployment? While gentrification forces the homeless out of one space, it ultimately pushes them into another environment. Is there a solution to stop this trend? And are there any places that have been exposed to gentrification or need to be gentrified around Davidson?
Sounded like an ironic clap over there.